Public history, South Africa. Some historical context. The initial colonization of South Africa came from the Dutch colonization in 1652. The Dutch East Indian Company established a small station for provisions on the Cape. Due to the discovery of gold and silver within South Africa, Dutch control was then replaced by British rule in 1795, which created friction between the Boer native people and their colonizers, leading to the First Anglo-Boer War of South Africa. The British were victorious. This granted them a chance to gain ultimate power over those within the region, which resulted in the later creation of the National Party in 1914 to do so. They then produced a policy of separation by race known as apartheid, which produced most of the conflict between 1948 to 1994. As a result of this, the African National Party, known as the ANC, as well as other movements, were created in opposition to apartheid. The ANC finally came to power under Nelson Mandela in 1994, ending this regime. This presentation looks at the extent to which the history of South Africa is displayed now and how it is taught and understood today.
A golden era for public history. Current South African public historians agree that the discipline experienced a golden era during the 1970s and the 80s. The University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg set up its own history workshop. Witwatersrand was a progressive South African university, and it actually still exists today. It promoted populist and worker histories using new methods such as oral history, the production of user-friendly publications, holding conferences and seminars, and running cultural days on campus to celebrate African diversity, something that was possibly lost during apartheid. It was using new methods to speak of the past and help inspire people to find courage to overthrow the current regime. Public history after apartheid. In the early 2000s, a handful of public history projects took place to examine the apartheid era. It revealed the pain, misery, and traumatic experiences that Black Africans experienced during the mid to latter part of the 20th century. Public history projects revealed that the history of apartheid was being taught only through a legislative lens. What did new laws do during segregation, for example? Then people were taught about important protesters or public figures and campaigners. However, in most cases, it really negated to teach people about how apartheid and other factors affected people's lives. For example, were they living in poverty and squalor? It was difficult to find employment, for example. And this is why public history has proven useful, because it gives a personal touch rather than learning dates, for example. But it is important, one thing, to point out that there's only been a handful of public history projects that have taken place, and public history hasn't actually been massively prominent in South Africa, but we'll get on to that later.
Upholding of public history. There are many sites that are set out to teach and show the history of South Africa. The African Heritage Resources Act of 1999 means that historical buildings should be maintained in their original state. This displays a governmental attempt to uphold public history. The recent creation of the Kliptown Open Air Museum, which was to mark and display the creation of the Freedom Charter, which was a list of core rights of those who were oppressed in opposition to apartheid in 1995, shows the societal thoughts of the time. This is a significant site as it shows the monument in which the charter was formed and is important in displaying historical mobilization of oppressed groups within South Africa's history. Equally, the creation of the memorial wall of the Fokoza Township Revolt is a key form of education for the public. It displays the names of those who died that day and is a crucial form of history that is being upheld. Sites such as these are very few, and their creation and upholding require charity and help to not forget a dark time in South Africa's history for society. Where public history has not gone far enough. Photo 2 on the slide shows a photo from the Sharpeville massacre. The individuals who were attacked that day whilst trying to protest against apartheid and packed police stations in order to overcrowd it in opposition to the discrimination of apartheid laws. This was a key moment in the history of apartheid in South Africa, and has had the same, however, this has had the same site of burial in the graves for all of its time. There is no cause for improvements to these sites that may be more informative and help remember those who were lost that day. Many describe the site as that it could be mistaken for any mundane graveyard. There is clearly a sense that many want to forget, perhaps due to apartheid still being fresh in many minds. Upgrading the grave sites would help uphold the names of those who were lost that day and teach many of what they went through for equality. A lack of reform could be due to failures by government to fund and sustain such sites. This can be seen further in the promise for the creation of the memorials at places such as the township revolts of in Boipatong, where the promise to place a memorial for an ANC member's death in a revolt has not been delivered. In many cases, due to community funding failures, South Africa is still a very poor and torn nation, and this limits the extent to which public history can be upheld and taught.
Why is public history uncommon in South Africa? Oral historians such as Sean Field say he leaves many interviews feeling helpless because of the deep personal trauma involved, but obviously oral history is part of public history. So Black Africans subject to the pain of apartheid find it incredibly difficult to talk about their experiences. It has not just been about their experiences of segregation, but also the lives they lived, which involved great poverty and hardship, as well as losses due to killings or murders from the oppressive regime towards Black people. And I think all this together has left many people not wanting to talk about the past and not wanting to go back to a time which was so difficult.